So the memory palace is a very well established routine for memorizing. And in essence, you're linking what you need to remember to a very clear mental map that you have. Now, I do this with students, but we call it mental mapping. And in fact, rather than going down the memory palace route, I tend to actually get them to physically draw stuff down. So why do we do that? And if we look at this example, and I'm an economics teacher by trade, what I would observe by this is, look, we've taken a topic, we've broken it out into the 4 key components, we've then discussed the key components, but we've done so in a way that's very colourful and actually very memorable as well. So it's very well structured. It's got different ideas for how to present similar bits of information from different parts of the knowledge that we need to acquire. So mental mapping is or mind mapping is a really powerful tool, but it needs to take some thought. And in fact, when I've been doing this with students in the 6th form for A-level, it may be 2 or 3 or 4 iterations that gets them to something which they find very useful to them in the exam hall. And the process of going through those iterations and really refining the links between information is very, very powerful. So even under extraordinary pressure in the exam hall, this is a fabulous way of being able to access the information that you need to respond to the examiner's questions. So my surefire approach to this is really the following. We could talk about encoding and retrieval. So in encoding, when you're in lessons, it's important that you take notes, not dictation. So there's something about being effortful and thoughtful about what you're actually writing down. That will help make it more memorable. Will also help you determine whether you understand what's being said. When you're reading, it's no good just reading and taking notes at the same time. I have found, particularly as I've gone through life, that the best thing to do is perhaps speed read through a chapter just to get a sense of it, and then immediately after, just jot down the key points that you can actually remember, and then go back over it and check, reading through it very closely and write notes at that point. You should always check your understanding with your teacher. So even if you think you've understood, you should confirm it with your teacher to make sure that your notes are accurate, and then you should test your understanding. I'm always a big fan of good encoding is active encoding. So when we talk about rich, we're really talking about elaborate, elaborate, elaborate. So pictures, color associations are good, and even memorable narratives, if you can come up with a little tale that gets you through the material you need to learn. And then equally, part of the encoding is about active revision. So good encoding includes retrieval practice. Take a topic, it might be 10 pages long in your notes or perhaps in the book, and then you should sort of target it to reduce it down to 4, then from 4 to 2, and then 2 to 1. And that way, you've really got the information in there with good cues to help you access under pressure. Now, there's an interesting piece of work around retrieval, and really my point is that good encoding is only ever as good as the ease with which you can get the content back out again. So lots and lots of research has been done, and the advice is to really space out your reviews. So the notion of cramming the night before, yes, you can remember a lot, potentially the next day. However, it disappears very quickly. It is also quite effortful finding that under pressure. So I think spacing is important. So lots of research has been done. It's good for rote learning and memorizing. And the kind of protocol you should apply, the research says, is this. So you look at how long you've got till the test, and then you apply these intervals to your revision. So if you've got 1 year off, then you should be looking at it once a month. Once you get within 6 months, you're reviewing every 3 weeks, 3 months every 2 weeks, 1 month every week, and then a week away, 1 to 2 days. But the important thing is that you're actually going over it quite often, but not the whole time, because it's important that it doesn't just stand alone, that it's actually integrated with everything else that you're doing in your life. So if we were to start to learn German, our first exam will be in 3 months, 2 months learning new material probably, and then we're going to get set for getting ready for the test. And these are the kinds of ideas that you need to apply to yourself. So with a 2-week revision period, but you're going to have other subjects to revise for. You might decide on 9 hours, up to you, but then this will provide you with a rule of thumb about how to allocate that time. So very useful, very powerful, and the research is pretty good. Interleaving, which is interfering with concentrated or repetitive practice, is also proved to be very powerful as an approach as well. So this is the idea that you don't simply just keep going over and over the same content or skill the whole time. You actually mix it up, because in an exam setting, you're going to have to respond to the question. You might not know what the question is going to be. You shouldn't know what the question is going to be in an exam. And so to be able to access the right information, irrespective of the cue that you're going to get, is important. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of work has been done on the sports side with this, and much of the research is in fact to do with sports. There is a growing body of evidence, though, from more cerebral activities. So I've offered 2 experiments here, just to provide some background to you. So with the badminton serves, there were 3 groups. Group A practiced in blocks, repeating the same serve a number of times. Group B, serial, so they practiced each serve in turn, and then Group C was just randomly. And you can see the scoring that they got in the test afterwards. So quite powerful. So 75% versus 50%. The identification of artists was fascinating for me. So this was based on the ability of students to correctly identify the artist of pictures painted. And they only had 2 groups, one of which that went through all the painting, went through a block of paintings by the same artist, and then moved on to another block. The others went through it randomly. And again, those who did it randomly really did much better, so really significantly better. What's interesting, though, and something to take away, is 80% of the participants in that artist test really felt that doing it in blocks was more comfortable and would be better. And yes, it wasn't. And this begins to highlight that the process of learning is difficult. So if something feels easy, it probably isn't giving you the learning that you need. So even though interleaving and mixing things up is a bit uncomfortable, it does lead to a better outcome. And then there are some wonderful bits and pieces from various US memory champions, world memory champions. Nelson Dennis techniques, really, they're echoed throughout. So it is all about focus and paying attention. It is about practice. But look at that. In the mix, there's picture things. So the observation from people who do memorizing for a living is that the human mind soaks up pictures, and relating it to what you already know is key. And then with memorizing, it's not just about stuffing it in the whole time. You really need to practice pulling it out as well. There are some great videos out there. We don't have all day. These are 3 that I've plucked out. You'll have the slides. Please do go and have a look at them. Graham Shaw, I enjoyed, really highlighted the importance of something spatial in there. And in fact, he takes it a step further and uses drawing. And it doesn't matter how good you are at drawing, just to help reinforce the encoding and make it easier to retrieve information. And then Josh Gerfier and Ricardo Luer are both very capable speakers who talk a lot about how to use narrative, so stories, to help you recall individual bits of information. So some checkpoint questions here. Please do use the chat box as we're going along. Let's see how we get on. I think that might have been a bit quick. Anyway, let's have a look at the answers to those questions. Let's have a look. So a lot of you got neuroplasticity. Thank you very much. Rich encoding. And then over which gap? Well, the synaptic gap or the synapse. LTP stands for long-term potentiation. How many frogs are left on that log? Well, I'm still not going to tell you. The research tells us that we are better to practice in blocks or randomly interleaving. Well, randomly. What's my name? Oh, we managed to get Dominic. Yes, thank you very much. What leads to better long-term retention, memory, cramming, or spaced review? Spaced. What was the name of the girl who eats insects? Olivia. And I don't think, oh yes, we've got a winner on the onomatopoeia. Thank you, Fiona. So onomatopoeia has plagued me through my life. I'm delighted to have had the opportunity to come up with a mnemonic this afternoon. Okay. So there she is, Olivia, just to reinforce that perhaps Olivia eats insects again. So moving on, so we got some ideas about how to get stuff in. We've begun to think about how to get stuff out. The next thing we just want to consider are different nodes and networks within our brain. Now this all looks very, very complicated. I only show this to you to demonstrate that there has been some science to indicate that there are different modes and networks in operation. I particularly liked the picture on the right-hand side there, the brain activity during a freestyle jazz improvisation, just showing how many parts of the brains are active during that, and how the central executive network has been released. So we're just going with the flow there. So managing those moves between networks are things that we need to master. At a simplistic level, though, we need to consider two modes of thinking, focused and diffused. So going back to a sort of pinball analogy, if I'm sat doing my maths homework, I'm expecting to do maths, I read the question, and then I'm going to go to the maths part of my brain. So I'm going to use all those synapses that have been firing away when I've been doing maths. Now, maths, interestingly, can be tricky. So the questions are often designed to require some degree of creativity. And I might not be able to find the way of solving a problem by focusing entirely on it and just using my mathsy part of the brain. I might need to use something else. And this can be very frustrating. And many people who've done maths at a high level would have come across this, that, yeah, we've been through all our procedures and processes. We understand the question. We just can't find the best way of doing it. And this is where perhaps continuing with the focus mode is not going to be terribly helpful. And what we really need to do is get away from it and open up the rest of our brain. So by get away from it, it means stop being focused on doing the maths, perhaps go for a walk even, stop and have a cup of coffee, go and have a chat, but to really allow our brain to wander around a bit more. And quite often, this will reveal a sort of an idea that we could use. So I frequently have had this when I've been doing academic work, might find myself stuck, perhaps with some writer's block, and I find, okay, what I need to do now is take a break. There's no use just battering away at this. I need to take a break. I need to go for a walk, let my mind wander. And quite often, I get to rest that concentrated area of the brain because the rest of the brain is being used when I do use the diffused. So I've rested the bit which is focused, and I've also explored all those other aspects of my thinking and previous learning, which I can then put into what I'm doing. So both are important. So concentrated thought and making the most of what we know is important, but also making the use of that bigger picture, that diffused mode of thinking. So does that really work? Well, here's a picture of Magnus Carlsen, who played Garry Kasparov at the age of 13. I'm of an age where I can just about remember this happening. And there he is. So the 13-year-old boy has just stood up. You know, it's probably the biggest moment of his life, playing the world champion at chess, and he's standing up, taking a wander around. So who do you think won this game? Try and pop your answer in the chat box, just to make me feel like I'm not just talking into the ether there. So who do we think won this name? Magnus Carlsen or Gary? So Magnus or Gary? Well, it would have been lovely if Magnus had won, but as it turned out, it was a draw. So he did go on to become a very well-respected master of the game. So we've got this idea of, okay, when we get stuck, what should we do? Well, I've been slightly awkward in my presentation of this. So I've said, well, when I get stuck, I need to go and go and use my diffused brain. Now, as students, of course, you perhaps don't need to work quite so independently. So there might be two reasons why you get stuck. Perhaps when you didn't quite catch the initial explanation, your mind was wandering in class when the teacher was talking. At that point, you should really go back to the book and read the relevant section. Perhaps ask the teacher to explain it again. Again, have a go at finding useful material on the internet. As I've put it out, there are lots of useful explanations on YouTube, but do check with the teacher afterwards. And certainly try and avoid getting too distracted by the other videos out there. So that's when we didn't quite get the initial explanation and we know it. When we have loaded that explanation, where we're confident we did know it, actually, it's time to use that defuse mode. So it's time to get away from the work. And I think there's a great rule here, and it's something I failed miserably to do when I was at school, is I used to do all the work I loved doing first. And that's really the worst way of doing it. So I was always left with very little time with the stuff I disliked, and I did, as a consequence, did badly in it. So my advice to students is really do the stuff that you're likely to encounter difficulties with first, and that will give you plenty of time to address the problems. Another way of getting yourself unstuck is to talk to the duck. So I use this regularly. It's entertaining. I think I'm banned from several schools because I have a tendency to hand out rubber ducks which have got squeaks in them to students. But this is a very powerful tool. It actually comes from the turn of the millennium and a book called The Pragmatic Programmer. But in the run-up to the year 2000, there was great concern about the millennium bug. So lots of computer programs have been written with 2 digits representing the year. And as a consequence, there was great concern that computers on the 31st of December 1999, as it ticked into the 1st of January 2000, might get terribly confused about whether it was 1900 or 2000. And this could cause calamity for our air traffic control system, among others. So we ended up with large numbers of programmers having to go through code line by line. And what they found was that if they set a duck on their keyboard and they read out each individual line of code to the duck and then explained to the duck exactly what that line of code was supposed to do, then they picked out the bugs very, very quickly. And this is a very powerful tool for students now to use when they come to revise. In fact, it's so powerful that I continue to have a duck. This is my Mona Lisa duck, which I have very nearby so that I too can check through what I've written and also to help me just debug stuff when I'm not quite certain what's going on. All right. So I'm now going to introduce you to 3 less than secret weapons to help your memory. It probably comes as no surprise to you, being people who are at school, but sleep, exercise, and brain savvy nutrition are things which really can help your memory. So sleep, first of all, happens in cycles. The most important thing to take away from this particular set of diagrams is the NREM, so the non-rapid eye movement sleep. So it happens at stage 4, there we are. There's a bit that happens in stage 3, and there's 2 rounds of it in stage 2 there. So non-rapid eye movement is going to be something that we want to be paying attention to. So what happens during non-rapid eye movement is we get this kind of brainwave going on. So you've got the K complex there, and the thinking is that the K complex is actually there to stop the brain being woken up by noises which are happening in the environment, so that the person can keep sleeping even if there's noise going on or other activities going on. The sleep spindle, though, is now, this sleep spindle form here, is thought to be the process by which memories are moved out of our short-term memory centres into the long-term. And they sort of fan out over the brain, and they help consolidate our memories and move them into longer-term storage, and help create all of those associations. So during our sleep, we're sort of rehearsing what's happened during the day. A lot of us have that experience, but there's also this mechanical piece that's happening in non-random eye movement that helps us consolidate our memories by moving them from short-term storage into long-term storage and helping us complete that association that needs to happen. So what does this tell us? So these two periods of non-random eye movement here, what does this tell us about how we can best manage our memory, best make use of sleep? So the advice is that actually this is the space here, those last 2 hours, so from the sort of hour 7 to hour 8. These 2 hours, these 2 periods of non-rapid eye movement are really where the best memory consolidation happens. So if we're going to try and move away or have less sleep, actually we're doing ourselves a good deal of harm in terms of memory. Something to bear in mind. Sleep also has some other functions in there. It really is about cleaning the brain out. So during the waking hours, there are all sorts of neurotoxins that we create for ourselves and our brain, and it's during that period of sleep that we get rid of all those toxic bits and pieces products that we produce ourselves and clean up those neurons. And cleaning up those neurons is also about flushing a, oh, hang on. So cleaning up our neurons is about flushing away some dendritic spines that we haven't been using as well. Now you might recall that it was really the 7th and 8th hour that were helping us with memory. In Japan, they actually have a name for taking naps during the night, so enumery, and this is commonplace. People taking a quick nap at work, and as long as they can get themselves into non-rapid eye movement, it will help consolidate and clear out some space and help with performance. So that's something to bear in mind. Perhaps not to be encouraged in class, but it is a well-established cultural characteristic in Japan. So sleeping and forgetting, I popped this on because yes, it is showing some dendritic spine growth, and having those dendrites out there are going to help us create new links, and growing new ones will help us have new links. But actually, if you have a look, there's also evidence of some dendrites that just disappearing. So if you look down here, for example, so that this one's gone. This one seems to be fading away in there. So it really is, the sleep part is also helping us forget things, which makes space for us to remember more and makes it easier for us to retrieve information. And those of you who perhaps know about PTSD will know that forgetting or lowering the emotional associations with memories is important for our health. It extends actually all the way into sport as well. I popped this up here just to show you the difference that sleep makes in terms of injury. So the percentage chance of injury with 6, 7, 8, 9 hours average sleep, and a lovely descending curve there. And then some statistics from the NBA is also demonstrate why sleep is so important. This is really about takes information from athletes who get more than 8 hours sleep a night and those who get less, and it's telling. I've also put this taxonomy of memory there, not to remember, but because what we're talking about in this context, in the sports context, is procedural memory. So you might recall we mentioned traveling by bike and learning how to ride a bike. That's the procedural memory in there. And priming is interesting as well. So priming is where we've come across something before, so we have a good idea where the information and process and memory is, and so we're primed to go and find that. And that could pose us some difficulties as well. So exercise will come as no surprise given the conversation. Exercise helps promote the growth of neurons and synaptic links. Just in here, you'll see that we've got a new phrase, so brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which is something that our brains produce and helps us have healthy brains and to grow new neurons. So BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, but known as BDNF for short, is something to pay attention to, and that is something which is produced in copious amounts when we take decent exercise. So the pictures here are based on rats doing exercise or not doing exercise, and you can see that the runners have got much richer sets of synapses being formed. So worthwhile just relating neuroplasticity to BDNF. So the BDNF is really there, and it's promoted by doing exercise and sleep, and we'll come on to nutrition in a moment, but it's got a key role to play in that neuroplasticity, and that's how we form new memories, don't forget. So very quickly, getting in the good stuff. Choline and flavonoids are the two biggies. I've popped together some quotes there. These are the kinds of food that you might want to have a look at eating more of. So if you're a big fan of broccoli, that's a good sign. I've left in the presentation for your review later some sources of the two, but both are really important to memory formation, and actually eating properly will help you protect your brain against disease. I'm talking of diseases very quickly. I'm pretty sure I've only got 7 minutes left. One of the biggest issues for adolescents, young people, and memory is procrastination. So you might remember that Nelson Dennis was of a view that you got to practice the whole time, and procrastination is an actual thing. So it does actually cause us pain. Procrastination is putting off something which we don't want to do. It actually happens in the insular cortex. That's somewhere. That's where all the pain is measured by our brain, and it is actually painful, procrastination. So the idea of doing something that we don't want to do causes us pain, so we resist doing it. What we learn, though, as we get older, is the pain will actually subside very quickly when we make a start, but it needs to be a committed start. So one of the techniques I talk to about my students is the Pomodoro technique, which was invented, if you like, by Francesco Cirillo, and he came up with the idea of using a Pomodoro-shaped timer, but you could use any timer. And in essence, you commit to a period of time. So I have a 9-year-old at home. 25 minutes is like eternity for a 9-year-old. So we've gone for 10. But at sort of key stage 4 age, 14 to 16, 25 minutes should be fine. So you do your task, you focus for 25 minutes, and then you take a break. And then I in fact actually use something called Forest on my iPhone, which you can find at the store, which is quite nice as well. And I'm doing well. I am growing my forest. So quick checkpoint. Oh. All right, appreciate it. Very quick again there. So LTP, long-term potentiation. The professor was Michael Morris. The secret weapons were sleep exercise and brain savvy eating. The Pomodoro effect is used to defeat procrastination. In which kind of sleep? Our sleep signals created non-rapid eye movement, and it's the 7th and 8th hour of an 8-hour period that gives us the best consolidation memory. Okay, so very quickly, just have a look at this diagram. Tell me what you see. Jot it in the chat box if you can. Okay, thank you, Roxana. All right, so the human experience of this is to see 2 triangles, one above the other, and 3 circles. In fact, if you look closely at it, there are no triangles. So there's no line around here. There are no triangles, and there are no circles. So there's no line here. And what this demonstrates is our brains are set up to perceive the world in a certain way, and they can fool us. So I look at this and I can still see 2 triangles and 3 circles, and I can't help it. But I do know that they don't exist. So even though I know that, I have to really fight to tell myself that doesn't exist. So our brains arrive at birth already wired to see things in a certain way. Here's another one. Take a look at these 2 tables. What's the difference? So I'm conscious of time. So even though those tables look quite different, they are in fact the same on the top. And when I talk to art students about this, they also say that what they see are 2 different tables, but when they start checking, because they're used to looking at this kind of thing, they spot that they are the same. So naturally, though, we're picking out stuff from our environment and forcing some kind of pre-awareness. Now, of course, this is a 2-dimensional diagram, so it doesn't really mean anything. Have a quick look at this. So what do we see here? Well, the common experience is to see a duck and a rabbit, and then a duck and a rabbit flashing. So as I look at it, I can't help but see a duck and then a rabbit, and then a duck and then a rabbit, and duck and then a rabbit. Of course, what we have here is just a squiggly line with a dot. And again, what these 3 exercises demonstrate to us is really our mind is determined to find meaning and patterns, whatever's confronted with it. So that's something to do with our evolution. It serves us very well, but it also leads us to errors. So I'm going to get you to do 3 questions now. It is a bit quick. The art of this is to read the question, answer the question just by coming up with the first number that comes into your head. So just 30 seconds. All right, so the important part here, and I know many of you are doing this as with English as a second language, so please don't, it's not about judging yourself at all. If you've managed to get 3 numbers out, that's great. Do have them jotted down to keep yourself honest. This is an exercise which has been done in lots of economics lecture theatres, mainly behavioural economics lecture theatres. So when we look at our 3 questions, we've been forced to come up with an answer very, very quickly. Here are the typical answers that are provided. It will come as no surprise that they're all wrong. And actually, when you take your time, the maths is quite straightforward. I'm very happy to stay on the call to explain the maths if you're struggling with it. When I first did this, I got one of them correct and the other 2 wrong. I'm pretty mathsy. And in fact, about 80% of people don't get all 3 right. And don't forget that this exercise is done predominantly with behavioural economists who are quite mathsy people. So what does this tell us? Well, we're using something called a heuristic. So we don't have much time. We've got something primed up inside our minds. We go there, we apply a rule of thumb, and that serves us pretty well. The trouble is, it really highlights some kind of cognitive bias. When we form that heuristic, that model of the world, the way it works, and how we're going to use that rule of thumb very quickly, it's really difficult to unlearn it. So while it was very useful to us on the savannah, when we were being hunted down by saber-toothed tigers, actually these days we need to be quite mindful of the fact that our brain will automatically go to the automatic system, which serves us very well. It means we can do lots of things. We're not drowning information. We're passing the information. But actually, if we really want to learn anything and form good memories, we need to go into the reflective system, and that requires time and effort. So you have to force yourself away from the automatic system into the reflective system in order to actually form new thoughts about how the world works, which is really what education is all about. Very quickly, can you teach old dogs new tricks? Well, this graph is brilliant. So as a youth, you have immense potential for changing your brain. So your brain itself is set up to be changed. As you get older and older, it takes much longer and much more effort to change it. So that's something to bear in mind. All of that stuff about nutrition down here will stop you getting these plaques. And these are the kind of things which are seen in Alzheimer's disease and the like. So I had 6 questions here. I know George is very keen for me to shut up and let you go. What I would say is do have a think about those questions. I'll give you what I thought. Hopefully I've managed to answer some of the questions you had about the memory. The reflective system is an effortful thing, and you need to make sure you invest effort if you're going to learn anything. Really, the other bits are for you to choose. So plenty of stuff in this presentation. Heuristic is a fantastic word. What is the meaning of the Japanese word inumeri? Well, it's sleeping while present. So it's sleep. So don't try it in your lessons. And I do want to just tell you about the frogs. There are, of course, 5 frogs left on the log. Now, many of you will be going, now that can't be right. One of them decided to jump off. Well, I'm here to tell you that you may have been quite excited about some of the things that I've told you about today. You might yourself have decided to use some of them. But there's a big difference between deciding to do something and actually doing it. And as a result, there are still 5 frogs on this log. My name's Dominic Tomlin. If you do have any questions, please do just drop me an email. I'm very happy to stay online and answer any questions that people might have now.